To define action for this contact path, first we need to make sure to create an action function. We can create this action function anywhere inside our application, but it is a standard to create them under this contact component, because since we are going to attach the action function to this path, the corresponding component will be the ideal place to define the action function. So just like how we have defined an loader function inside the home.jsx, very similarly, we need to define an action function inside the contact component. Let me copy this products loader and paste inside the contact component. We need to come towards the end of the file, and outside of the contact functional component, we need to create a separate async function. The name of the function, I'm going to keep it as contact action. The name can be anything, but I'm going with this name. Inside this, we're going to write some logic. Let me delete everything inside the try block. Before we try to write some logic inside this function, first, we need to make sure we are converting normal HTML form that we are trying to use inside this component into a form component that is provided by the React Router DOM library. First, I'm going to import form from the React Router DOM. So this form component is the enhanced version of HTML form element that submits the data to the action function. So let me import this form, followed by I'm going to replace this HTML form element with form component. The same I need to mention towards the end as well. Here I have the form closing tag. Let me update this to form component. After mentioning this form component, we should also mention what is the HTTP method that this form should follow. Since we are trying to submit brand new data, we need to make sure to mention the method as post. So let me mention post. Inside these double quotes, I will type post. The main reason of using this form component is it is going to provide whatever information that the end user is trying to submit to the action function. From this action function only, we are going to invoke the REST API. Before we invoke the REST API, first, we need to have the data that is entered by the end user inside my form component. That's a whole reason of mentioning the form component around this HTML form that we have built. So this HTML form, it is having name, email, mobile number, and message fields. All these details, we can happily read them inside the action function that we have defined here. So this function can be anywhere inside your application. But to read the data available inside the form, we need to perform the destructuring of the input parameters. So here we can accept request as a first parameter, followed by, in case if you are also expecting some request parameters, then you can also mention params, which is the another object or property that is going to be injected by the library into your action function. To perform the destructuring, we should use a curly brace, not the square brackets. Let me correct the same. After correcting the braces, now I should be able to read the data that is available inside the form with the help of this request. So let me type request.form data. There is a function with the name form data available inside the request. Since this form data is going to return a promise, we need to make sure we are mentioning await before this request.form data. And the output from this form data, I'm going to catch with the constant variable name as data. The variable name can be anything. Inside this data, I'm going to have all the data of the elements. Inside the form, we are trying to give a name for each of the input element. For example, for the name input element, we are trying to give name as name itself. So please make sure you are using this name attribute of the input element, and whatever value you assign to this name attribute, using the same, you can fetch the submitted data from the form data object. For the email, we mention the name as email, and for the mobile number, we mention the name as mobile number, and towards the end, for the message, the name is message. Using the same name variables, we can try to read the data from these data object. What I'll do is, first, I'll try to create a constant with the variable name as contact data. To this contact data, I'm going to assign a JSON object because I want to send the data that is submitted by the end user using the JSON format. Under this JSON object, the first key that I'm going to mention is name. To this name, I'll try to assign the value by using data dot get, and to this get method, we need to pass the name as the value because we have used the same name here inside the text field. If you go to the text field where we are trying to accept the name, so whatever you have mentioned for this name attribute, the same thing you have to mention as an input to the get method. Next, similarly, I want to populate email as well. Let me type email. For this get method, I need to make sure I'm mentioning email followed by mobile number and message also I'll try to populate. So the key here will be mobile number and the same I'll try to mention here. And towards the end, I'll mention message. And for this get method also, I'll try to mention message. So whatever keys that you are trying to use here inside your JSON object, they should match with the fields that you have defined inside the DTO class on the backend. On the backend, we have a DTO class with the name contact request DTO. The same contact request DTO we're trying to accept as an input for this REST API with the help of this request body. So whatever we are going to send inside the request body, all the data will be transferred into this DTO object. Since the name of the fields are all matching, the transferring of the data from the JSON to this DTO object is going to take care by the Spring Boot behind the scenes. Once we populate the request data using the request.form data, we can try to send this data to the backend by using Axios library. First, I need to make sure I'm importing API client. Using this API client from my try block, I'm going to invoke the post method because we are trying to submit new data. We need to make sure we are mentioning this post at 3 different places. The first one is on the backend. On top of your controller method, we need to use this post mapping. The same post method we should also mention after the form. So here we have mentioned form. For this form, we have mentioned the method as post. The next place is while invoking the REST API with the help of Axios library, we need to make sure to invoke this post method. Followed by, I'm going to mention what is the path. The path will be contacts. After contacts, we need to mention what is the request body that we want to send. The request body that we want to send is this contact data JSON object. Let me mention the same. Since the post is going to return the promise, I need to make sure I'm mentioning await here. Followed by, if the REST API invocation is successful, I'm going to return a JSON object with the key as success, and to this key I'll try to assign the value as true. So this gives a confirmation that the invocation of this contacts REST API is successful, and if there is some exception happening, I'm going to throw a response object from my catch block with the error message and status. Otherwise, I'll try to send the default message as failed to submit your message, please try again. Now our action function is ready. As a next step, we need to map this action function to the contact path inside the main.jsx. So here first I need to import contact action from the contact component. The same contact action I will try to assign to this contact path with the help of action property. For loader, we should use the loader property for the actions where you want to submit the data to the backend REST API. Under all such scenarios, we need to use this action property, and to this action property, we need to mention the action function name, which is contact action. So let me save this and go to the browser. Before that, I'll try to restart my application on the backend. Since we have created brand new REST API, I want to make sure all the changes are reflected properly. Let me stop this and start again in the debug mode. If there are any issues, we are going to get a runtime exception. My backend started without any issues. Now inside the UI application, I'll go to the contact page, and here we don't have any errors. We are good. Let me try to save this data. So I'll try to enter my name, Madan, and email as tutor@easybytes.com. And the mobile number, I'll try to enter some random value. And coming to the message, I'll submit, I want to buy bulk tickets from your store. So this is the data that we want to send. So let me click on this submit. And as soon as I click on the submit, nothing is happening. Let me check inside the console. Inside the console also, I don't see any error. I will check in the backend as well. Here also, I don't see anything abnormal. Maybe I'll try to debug the code. I'll keep a breakpoint here inside the contact controller, followed by inside the contact service IMPL. I'll keep a breakpoint inside the catch block just to check if I'm getting any exception. Let me click on the submit button one more time. Yes, the breakpoint reached to the backend. Let me release this breakpoint inside the REST API. Next, the execution is stopping inside the catch block. That means we are getting some runtime exception while we are trying to save these contact information into the database. Let's see the details of the exception by opening this exception object. The detail message says identifier of entity contact must be manually assigned before calling persist. So it is saying inside the contact, the identifier field, which is the primary key ID value, is missing. But based upon our understanding, it should be automatically taken care by the database. Let me release this breakpoint, followed by I will open this contact entity class. On top of this ID field, we should be having some strategy to generate the primary key ID value. If you go to the other entity that we have with the name product, here we have mentioned this strategy with the name of @generated value and the strategy type is identity. I remember selecting these while generating these contact entities. Seems I messed up something. Maybe what I can do is I'll try to generate this contact entity one more time. Let me delete the existing entity class. Once this class is deleted, I'll go to the database and select the contacts, and here I'm going to go with the option create JPA entities from DB. So the class name will be contact, and under the ID generation, I'll make sure I'm selecting the identity, followed by these are all the columns. So let me click on this OK. This time I'll make sure this generated value annotation is present. For some reason, previously this was missing. So when we mention this annotation, we are giving the responsibility of generating this ID to the database. With these changes, our code should work properly. Let me do the build. Once the build is completed, I will try to restart my application. When I'm trying to start my application, I'm getting some compilation errors. Let me go to contact service IMPL. Here seems we have regenerated the contact class. It is not reflecting immediately. Let me do the build one more time to make sure everything is compiled properly. Now I'll try to start my application. I'm going to clean the console, and inside the UI, previously we got the 500 error because we debugged more than 10 seconds. If Axios client is not receiving the response with a maximum of 10 seconds, it is going to throw this timeout error. That's why we are seeing the same on the error page. So let me go back to contact again. Let me enter the details as Madan, email as tutor@easybytes.com, and some random mobile number. Please make sure you are entering 10-digit mobile number because we have some HTML validation. Followed by, I'll try to enter some random message. Let me click on this submit, and the breakpoint stopped. I'm going to release all the breakpoints. So this time the execution is successful. That's why we're able to see this insert SQL statement that is generated by the Spring Data JPA. If I go to the database and query this contacts table, you will be able to see a new record is inserted with the name Madan, email, mobile number, and message that we have submitted. But on the UI, we are not giving any feedback to the end user. And we should also reset this form. As of now, the form is retaining the values even after submitting the data successfully. We are going to improvise this in the next lecture, but I'm assuming you are clear on how to use the actions that are available in the React Router library. Whatever logic that we have built with the help of this action function, we should be able to easily implement with the help of use effect and use state hooks as well. Maybe I can have a function that I can invoke when this button is clicked. From that function, I can invoke the REST API. But doing all that with the help of use effect and use state, you will end up writing a lot of code, especially around the state management. So that's why whenever possible, please try to use these action functions. Otherwise, using use effect and use state is also fine because inside industry, both these approaches are valid. You need to choose based upon your project scenario.